This podcast discusses child sexual abuse and the impacts of harm on children and families. While we won't include graphic detail, some listeners may find this content distressing. Please take care while listening and consider pausing or seeking support if you need to. There's many and varied support services available, including Lifeline on 13 11 14, Kids Helpline for 5 to 25-year-olds on 1800 55 1800, and the Sexual Assault Helpline on 1800 010 120. If you're outside of Australia, we encourage you to seek a local support service.
In this episode, the second last of In Plain Sight, we turn toward the future. Over the past 5 episodes, we've heard the voices of advocates, investigators, and system leaders. We've explored how children were harmed, how warning signs were missed, and how institutional dynamics allowed abuse to continue in plain sight. Episode 6 is about what must change. The review does not simply diagnose what went wrong, it sets out a clear, practical roadmap for reform, grounded in evidence, shaped by lived experience, and one that recognises safeguarding children is a shared responsibility across government, the sector, and the community. Today we'll unpack the key recommendations of the review, how governance must be strengthened, how accountability must be real and enforceable, how prevention must begin earlier, and how victim survivors must be supported, not just acknowledged. Later in the episode, I'll be joined once more by Conrad Townsend, expert on child sexual exploitation prevention, and Beth McNamara, National Education Manager at the Daniel Morcombe Foundation. Joining me now is Luke Twyford, Principal Commissioner of the Queensland Family and Child Commission and Chair of the Child Death Review Board, who led this review and has been clear from the outset. This work is about system reform, not blame, and about ensuring this never happens again. Hi Luke, we are coming to the end of the review. There has been so much ground covered. After everything that we have discussed, what's the single most important shift from your perspective that the system must make now?
I think if we're truly going to safeguard our children, we need to make it someone's job to detect threats. We currently do not have a person in government or an entity, an organisation, who puts together all the threads. The 18 missed opportunities in this case, I fundamentally believe if it was someone's job to collect them, he would have been caught earlier and there would be less victims. So how do we make it someone's job to look at each of the jigsaw puzzle pieces and build the whole picture? That will be the game changer for the future.
The report makes strong recommendations about governance and accountability. What needs to change to ensure those warning signs are acted on earlier? Is it that piece that you've just been speaking about, or is there more that needs to happen?
Well, I think once you make it someone's job to build the whole picture, you've actually got to change all the other systems to send intelligence to that central place. So passing laws that actually enable the sharing of information that would otherwise be private, encouraging people to work across sectors. We currently have a early childcare employee register being built across the nation, but if these people move the sector, then we miss the benefit of building that employee register. So make it someone's job to build the whole picture about a threat to a child, and then force every other institution, organisation, regulatory body and police force accountable for sending them information that will help in that threat detection. Mixed with, that's the top level. That's what a government can do. At the organisational level, we are seeing increasing numbers of children being placed in and having trust placed in for-profit organisations, the care economy. We need to make people who own and run companies more directly accountable for the safety of the children that they are designed to operate with. That means ensuring that leaders change the culture within the organisation, that they don't pass the buck when a concern arises, that they don't move people on so that they go and harm someone else in another company that's not theirs. There's a whole lot of work we need to do to change the accountability and liability of people that run organisations. So if we did those two things in combination, we'd quickly uncover a whole lot of current risk to children, and we'd make a difference for the future.
One of the strongest themes to the recommendations is this focus on prevention. What does effective prevention look like in practice, and what's the biggest priority right now to see that?
Well, I think over the few of the last episodes, we've spoken to awareness raising awareness in children, parents, workers, and across government is step number one, which would address the stigma and the taboo of speaking about this. But I think fundamentally, if we're going to prevent child sexual abuse, we need to make it someone's job to coordinate and facilitate our prevention efforts.
Your review is very clear about the system's obligation to victim survivors, and the way that you have incorporated their experiences, their stories, their perspectives is really quite remarkable. What does meaningful support for these people actually require?
It's one of the most harrowing parts of the review from my perspective, as someone that went through the information, met with people, wrote their stories, and then worked out how to translate that into a public report. The age of these victims is confronting, and knowing how child sexual abuse has a lifelong impact makes that even more confronting. So I wanted people to think about how we provide counselling and support to victims. And when I use the word support, that's a very broad term and it can mean a whole number of different things to different people. And that's exactly why I use it. I found contracts for child sexual abuse counselling that meant that you could only receive counselling up to 5 years after the incident. Well, for some of these victims, the crime wasn't detected till well after that time frame. I found counselling support services that could only provide services to people that lived within certain postcodes, and they were having phone calls asking for help and saying, no, we can't help you, you live in the wrong area. That's profoundly wrong. It's just not okay. How did we get to that point? And when I really think through how victim survivors need our help, it's a life stage issue with any trauma. It appears at different times in different ways. There is obviously the immediate crisis response trauma, and we need to do that better and we need to do that well. And I've already said that the criminal justice system doesn't always recognise that. But child sexual abuse survivors will say that entering the teenage years, where you start to form romantic relationships, is a key trigger for the past experience. So what can we do to support them then? Becoming a parent for the first time is a key trigger, and dropping your children off for the first time at an institution, be it early childcare or schools or a sleepover, are also other triggers. And so when you have children under the age of 5 who are victims, we need to understand that there's 30 years of potential support that we might need to provide. And if I tell you one more story that's confronting, every year I go to the remembrance ceremony here in Brisbane for victims of institutional sexual abuse who are now of age where they are entering aged care facilities, having been abused in institutions as a child 40, 50 years ago, and now seeing a world where they are again being placed in an institution and bringing back those memories. This is something that stays with people forever. It certainly doesn't mean that they don't go on to live rich, fulfilling, and wonderful lives. I don't want us to diminish victim survivors in any way. But I think we have an obligation to support them throughout the entirety of their life, given what has occurred, and finding the right way to provide and offer that support is what we speak to in our report.
Do we include victim survivors enough in the solutions to prevention?
I would say no, because we don't know who's in charge of designing prevention. Individual organisations that have individual prevention programs certainly do include victim survivors from my observation. But as a whole of government, I think our report outlines the national plan and the Queensland state plan for sexual abuse prevention and response has prioritised adult survivors. The need to distinguish between teenage and adult and child survivors of sexual abuse is something we need to deeply consider, because I think there are different responses and needs for those cohorts. And certainly the way we would understand that best is actually by speaking to those people directly and empowering them to actually design the strategy and the solutions.
Many of these failures weren't about policy gaps, but indeed about culture. How does the system actually change their culture?
That's the critical question. I would love to live in a world where I produce a 500-page report and every single person reads it and learns from it and changes what they need to change. That's not reality. There are thousands of reports being produced in Australia every day with a litany of problems and a litany of recommendations, and none of them will change culture, because what changes culture is the day-to-day reality. And therefore, we need to target a changing leadership approach across our organisations and our society. We need to have them prioritise these issues and these solutions. And we need to see that flow down through society. At the same time, we need to embolden and empower and encourage those at the grassroots level who have been talking about these problems for decades, who well know what the problems and solutions are, to build from the ground up new approaches, new ideas, new solutions. And when we get our leadership priorities meeting the grassroots innovation, we will get the culture change.
Your recommendations have been delivered to government. What's your message to government and the sector as they are working through their plan?
It was really one of the highlights of this review from a legal bureaucratic perspective, was looking at all the ideas the board collated around what needed to change and starting to plot them against operational and transformational. We deliberately made 28 recommendations, of which only some we called transformational recs. They're the ones that are bold, that are going to change and introduce new approaches to this issue. And the operational ones are the ones we can just get on and do now. They are improving the current system with more funding or a different approach or new technology. And we want governments to do both, obviously. But ultimately, recommendation number one, that the Australian government and the Queensland state government both publish a response to this report. If there's anything I'd love to see, it's that, because that means we've got transparency, we've got awareness, and we've got accountability sitting where it needs to sit. And I'm really hopeful at this stage in the process that both governments will do that. And fundamentally, that's the next step. Let's get not a Child Death Review Board or a Queensland Child and Family Commissioner to share their opinions on what needs to change. Let's actually get both governments stand up and say what they're willing to change.
Well, you're certainly not at the end of the journey yet, even though the report has been delivered. I wish you well with the recommendations, and I know many people will be staying tuned to see how they play out. So thank you.
Thanks, Kirstine.